Alrighty, let's get another convo going. This is how we do for October 30th, 2022. NJ along with Mr. P, as in Mr. Pissed Off. This is the convo. What a shitbox week for the Toronto Maple Leafs, Michael. Good morning.
Good morning, Norm. Let's just say it's not a particularly great situation with this team in the sense that, and this seems to be the mantra, the narrative over the last few years, when they play teams that they should beat, that they're better than, they don't win. And, you could say that I know that some people have gone out there and said, well, that's sort of a narrative for the playoffs. No, I mean, they took Tampa to 7 games, but when, they should have beaten Columbus, they didn't beat them. They should have beaten Montreal, they didn't beat them. So maybe that is
up in that series, up in the series against Tampa, up in the series against Boston back in 2019.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think there's a certain level of okay. Granted, last year, and the season started a little later than it normally did, but they were 2-4-1 to start the year, and then all of a sudden went on this run where at the end of November they were first place in the NHL. So, are you going to scream with your hair on fire that the sky is falling? No, but it is concerning that you start off a season with a West Coast trip against 3 teams in San Jose, Anaheim, and LA as part of it. They beat Winnipeg. They lose to Vegas. That's not a shame because Vegas is a good team. But those 3 teams in California, they should win all 3 games. And now they've lost in overtime to San Jose, and they lost 4-2 last night to the LA Kings. And it's not those teams. I mean, in the sense that, okay, San Jose is going to get up for Toronto, and they're going to play "You Make My Dreams Come True" in the locker room to sort of rip on the Leafs after the game. It's the Leafs. It's the team that is
calling oats out of it.
No, but that's what they did. They played the Leafs goal song in the locker room after the game as a troll. So it's like, okay, now if I were the Leafs, I'm like, okay, remember that when you play them the next time they come to Toronto, and stick it up their ass.
The Leafs aren't vindictive that way.
It's
an emotionless hockey team, Mike. We know that, right? It's all about skill and metric. That's
an 82 game schedule is full of little petty motivations, right. and that's a petty motivation. It's like, okay, I'll remember this, but. I don't think you're right. I don't think the team will. But that's the problem. Is that, okay, there are 3 games on this 5-game road trip that they were teams that they are better than, teams that are going to finish. Now, LA might make the playoffs, but they didn't. They really didn't show up for most of the game against the Sharks, and they really didn't show up for almost all the game against the LA Kings. Now they played the 3rd game in 4 nights against Anaheim, a team with a bunch of young talent, and who knows what's going to happen.
Right. They're not scoring goals, Mike. The team's collective emotion is drier than a saltine cracker. The leader, I mean, he got upset a couple nights ago. Wow, big deal. The coach can't say any fucking thing, or he'll get chastised by the people on Hockey Night in Canada for being insensitive. Austin Matthews, Mitch Marner, William Nylander, all these guys are unbelievable players, but emotion and excitement and vigor and vim and vitriol, these guys don't exude. They do not demonstrate. It's not a knock against them, but if we're expecting them to reach this next level amid a slumping hockey or indecisive and hockey that lacks confidence, we're not going to get it. So these guys are just going to have to find their way out of it, 1 goal at a time. This is the Convo, Norm, along with Mike. Spike 10-1-1-1. It feels like another lost season. Holy shit, we're 11 games in, and it's another lost season. We're living in the moment, guys. I understand that's how you feel. We're living in the moment. We can't lament. We can fear a little bit what's to come based on what we're seeing right now, but holy shit, it's not a lost season.
It's 2 weeks into the season.
Love you though, Spike. Love you. Thanks for being here.
It's 2 weeks into the season, so I'm not going to set alarm bells. But I think the warning signs are there, and I think again, when you're 4-4-1 through 9 games, and three of the four losses are to teams that you should pummel into the sand, Arizona, Montreal, and San Jose, then that's a concern. That's a concern. I mean,
that's the thing. Should they have, Mike, considering the adversity they seem to generate for themselves to start seasons, considering we think they're going to win but they don't, should we expect them to beat these teams? Because in the past, at this moment, in this juncture of seasons gone by, they haven't. So should we more expect that they're kind of are stuck in the mud and being this way until they find their way, and maybe just take a deep breath and go, look, it's a long season. We understand there are trials and tribulations in the early part, but they always seem to come through.
Based on the recent past, I can see what your point is. They lose to Buffalo, they lose to Arizona, they lose to Montreal. So why should we expect them to do that? But that is what is expected of what has been promoted as a good team. And I do think that they have the talent of a good team. Are there holes in this lineup? Have there been injuries that are factors? Sure. But okay, I'm sorry. You see other, and I got dragged over the coals last year when I made a statement on Twitter about, good teams like Tampa Bay and Colorado don't lose to teams like Arizona and Ottawa. And of course, then everybody, they lost to the Senators here. It's an overall point, folks.
Right.
Yes, on any given Sunday, on any given night, a team in the NHL can beat another team in the NHL. But the Toronto Maple Leafs have made it a habit over the last few years of losing to teams that they are not. Those teams are not as talented as they are. It's a question of motivation. It's a question of these teams get up for Toronto and Toronto doesn't get up for them. And those two, I pointed it out last year, Norm, the points that they lost to those three teams, Arizona, Buffalo, and Montreal, cost them first place in the Atlantic Division, and they would not have had to play Tampa Bay had they won those games. So I'm sorry, there are ramifications to these early losses against teams that they are better than.
Yeah, and time will tell whether what the Leafs are lacking now and what they've left on the table in terms of points will come back to bite them and impact them negatively down the stretch. OG's Converse, thanks for all of your comments in the chat. Everybody's fired up. So it's good that we're showing emotion. It'd be nice for the Maple Leafs to show emotion, but as I've said numerous times, this is an emotionless team. They're not the Colorado Avalanche. It's not a Calgary Flames kind of club. It's not a team that a Matt Tkachuk is running around and ginning up some kind of animosity to fire up his boys. This is not that team. And it's in times like this where you want that intangible. You want that that leadership to shine through, to grind out a fucking win late in the game, even if the team is struggling. And it remains to be seen. They're winless on this West Coast road swing. They got a point. Big shit. Now they go in to take on Anaheim. And, if they don't win, they'll be returning home with their tails between their legs. Right, Mike? So,
well, if they win tonight, they're 2-2-1 because it was a 5-game trip. They won in Winnipeg. No, I mean I'm saying they should
talking about the West Coast.
Right. But I'm saying in this 5-game trip they needed to go. I mean, based on the level of competition, they needed to go 3-1-1 or 4-1. They at best they're going 2-2-1. They've surrendered points, and that's not based on Buffalo getting onto a quick start. Boston is 6-1 last time I looked.
They're doing what they're Mike. They're doing what they're doing. Just
they have to be concerned with that.
I know, brother. But the thing is, nobody's expecting the Leafs to be this way except people like us, because we know they leave a lot to be desired against these shitty teams early in the in the season and somehow find their way. And that may still be the case. But were we expecting Boston to be this good? Were we expecting some of the Leafs' other adversaries to be as good as they are? I guess the hope from Leaf fans and those who think they know more than the rest of us is that things will even out and get back to an even keel, and then we can lament or be concerned about what really ails the Maple Leafs, when they put themselves in a position of success. But right now, everything's jinkety janked and kind of topsy turvy and twisted on its head. I mean, is that not one way we can look at it and say, look, let's take a deep breath and things will even out? Or do we say that, look, the team's defensive woes are real based on lack of depth, lack of bodies, guys like Justin Holl? Again, fuck, he's doing his best. He's somebody who's out there filling a spot, but all in all, if things were perfect, the guy wouldn't even be in the league. And then clearly the Leafs are gripping it too tight offensively. They're bottom 10 in goals scored. They don't have anybody near the top top players in overall stats. So it seems a bit abnormal.
It's abnormal, but it's also expected. I mean, like I said, last year they struggled in October. They started slow. Austin Matthews struggled in October. He started slow, and then he started scoring like crazy in November. Now, last year he's coming off a wrist injury. And there are some people who think he's hurt right now, but I have not heard any indication that he is. Right now, teams are being more physical with him. Teams are pushing back on him. They've tried to shake up the top line. I don't think the problem is Michael Bunting playing on the left wing. I think it's the problem is that Matthews and Marner aren't scoring. Now, they scored in San Jose. Marner got a goal at the end of the second period. Matthews got the tying goal in the third period. But there is no consistency of effort throughout the lineup. You've got a bottom six that really hasn't produced.
What a dig. Sorry, Brad Tyndall, rookie coach. It might be right from this mistake from the start. Go get your start on a non-contender, learning lessons the hard way.
I honestly, Brad, I think that argument is bullshit. I really do. It's like, I mean, because everybody was complaining that Mike Babcock, being the Stanley Cup winner, the guy, he was the wrong fit, and that Sheldon Keefe was the right fit after winning a Calder Cup, and now all of a sudden Sheldon Keefe is the wrong fit. Now it's Barry Trotz. This is not about the coaching. This is about the players on the ice. Then and I'm sorry to go back to my well-worn mantra, but what needed to be done with this team over the last couple of years was to shake up the core group. And you're not going to shake up the core group by bringing them back every single year and changing the scenery around them.
Why do I feel, Mike, sorry to interrupt you, brother. Why do I feel like Sheldon Keefe doesn't exactly like this group? Like, if he had his way, things would be different. Well, he just does. Again, he's connected to Kyle Dubas. He's connected to that intelligentsia. He's connected to this metric-based hockey because he's come up through the ranks. But he is a rough and tumble kind of guy who's had to bite his tongue, who has to walk back comments about guys he feels are not putting in the right effort, and he's restricted in so many ways. And I wonder if things continue to go down the wrong path, or they play this mundane hockey that really doesn't develop much, that he may lose his job. But it might be a blessing, because I'm not so sure he really, 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 really wants to propagate this philosophy.
Well, I've been of the opinion that if Sheldon Keefe loses his job, Kyle Dubas is losing his job. I think
they're tied at the hip, you think?
Yes.
Yeah, I don't seem like they're like, I don't know. I think Sheldon Keefe wants a different kind of game that Kyle Dubas is not necessarily fond of.
Well, I'm
still trying to fight to.
I think that this team right now is not playing the way that they expected them to play. I think they expected their bottom six. See, that's the thing. They brought in guys on the bottom six, like Yarncroke, who's been really not very impressive so far, other than taking dumb penalties. Like Yarncroke, like Abe Kubel, like Aston Reese. I think they expected, a little more consistency, a little more buy-in, a little more contribution from their third and fourth line, not to put all the weight and all the focus on the top six. And the problem is that hasn't come to fruition. Now, you'll get the occasional David Kampf goal, and Pierre Engvall scored yesterday, but their bottom six really hasn't performed up to expectations, and it's all on the core group. And that's the part. Now, last year it was all on the core group, and after at a certain point, if the other team shuts the top six, then you've got nothing really to show for the rest of the lineup. They expected this team to be able to have a four-line offensive attack. Not to say that you're going to get Aston Reese to score 20 goals, but to have contribution. And so far, if you've noticed, it's been a mix master on the third and fourth line. They bring in Simmons and Clifford. They bring in Malgin. They've put in Avi Kubel. They put in Aston Reese. That is symptomatic of third and fourth liners that are not doing their job. And when you pair that on top of having one goaltender out and probably having your best two-way defenseman in terms of physicality in Jake Muzzin out, that's a recipe for mediocrity. And that's where they are right now.
Wow. Just going through the comments, state of survival. Dubas is amazing at drafting skilled players, but can't draft character players, defensemen, or goalies. That's the way it looks. Not saying that is indeed the case, but if this team were 12-0, the conversation would be more positive, but there would still be some acidity in the discussion based on what the team has lacked when push has come to shove. Right now, in this moment, it doesn't look that great. The team isn't scoring the way it has in the past. It's Rocket Richard Trophy winning sniper is gripping it a little too tight. He's chipping away, but he's not scoring at the same level. Justin Hall looks like a wreck out there, but he's having to play because it's a war of attrition on the back end. It's ugly right now, Mike, but the team isn't 1-9. It's grinding away, and as well as I do, in the next couple of weeks, if they go on a 3 or 4 or 5 game win streak, they're right back in the mix of things. And will Boston be the top team in the conference in 3 or 4 months? Will some of these teams we're surprised at the level of play right now continue to play at that surprising level? Probably not. So as things go on, we're looking for a little bit more of a calibration of good and bad kind of equaling out, or eclipsing each other in the expected way. But regardless, even if this team was really, really good right now, it would have a problem on defense. We're still kind of wondering about the goalie situation, and the team isn't scoring to the level that it should be. So
I don't see that. That's the thing. I don't think that the goalie situation really has cost them victories.
No. It's but the team. If it's just Samsonov, just him, and I don't know, whoever, Shalgren or if Michael Hutchinson reappears, that's concerning. Murray and Samsonov need 2 healthy guys. One guy on the bench, one guy playing, and they flip.
I agree. But what I'm saying is Shalgren did not cost them the game against Arizona.
Fair enough.
Shalgren did not cost them a game against San Jose. The fact that they didn't score, the fact that they didn't play good defense is the reason that they didn't win. Samsonov is 4-2. I don't know what his save percentage after last night was, but I think he's in the 920s. He's played well. Now, ideally, do they want Matt Murray in there? Do they want a split of the goaltending? Of course they do. They want Shalgren to play and be the third goaltender down with the Marlies. But in this instance, Murray gets hurt, and when you have lemons, you make lemonade.
Right.
The goalies are not the problem. The problem is that right now your top end offense is not scoring. I think John Tavares, who everybody was concerned about coming out of the preseason after being injured, has been arguably their best forward. Him and Nylander.
Well, he has 10 points in 9 games. He's the only guy playing at more than a point per game clip, which at 9 games really doesn't mean much. But when the rest of the guys are not playing to their traditional capability, then it does mean something.
And most of that offense has been on the power play, but still he's producing. It's right now it's Matthews and Marner are not producing up to the expectations. And the bottom 6 are not producing up to expectations. But people were joking there about Marty franchise. This is the problem right now.
Hall is to Keefe what Marty Marincin is to Babcock, or was to Babcock. Holy shit!
This is the problem. they have no choice other than to play Justin Hall.
Of course.
Because Muzzin is out, because Liljegren is out. Once Liljegren comes back, I would think that you're going to see a switch over of Liljegren playing with Rasmus Sandin, and then probably, Giordano playing with Hall, because Giordano played with Hall last year in the playoffs and covered up for his many failings. But this is the problem. The problem is, and you saw it last night against LA, 2 penalties in the second period. Justin Hall takes. They both end up in the back of the net.
Well, he's overwhelmed. He's overwhelmed, Mike. If you're taking those kinds of penalties, and so he's overwhelmed. The team is underwhelming, and
they have no choice right now but to play him 20 minutes a night.
Fair enough.
And he was on the ice for the 2 goals after the 2 power play goals.
Right.
One was not his fault. Rasmus Sandin made a bad play on the Fiala goal, but I think, I don't think Sandin should be playing sheltered minutes, because he's a sort of a double-edged sword. Offensively, he's going to give you something that not many of the other defensemen can give you, but sometimes, he's young enough that he's still going to make some errors. When he played with Liljegren last year, they played off of each other very well, and that was a good pairing. They need Liljegren back, but he's not the savior. And the problem is that you were expecting to have a veteran, stable guy in Jake Muzzin patrolling on the blue line, playing 20 minutes a night. You may not have him for the rest of the year. And if you don't have him for the rest of the year, then it's up to Kyle Dubas to go out and get a defenseman. But the problem is that 10 games into the season, nobody is trading defensemen. And I think you mentioned Ethan Bear. The Ethan Bear trade that popped up. He's a right-hand shot. He's a pretty decent defenseman. The Leafs, Carolina was looking to move him. He wasn't going to play there. He was making over $2 million. They don't have the cap space, but with the LTIR room with Muzzin on the LTIR, they had the room to add him. But they were at 50 contracts, and they didn't want to trade a draft pick. So he went to Vancouver. And here's the problem. You're up against it when you have 50 contracts, and you're up against it with the cap. So, that's why, excuse me, the last couple of years I said you had to move out and create cap space to address the areas of need. And who have I been saying? Now, it was Justin Hall, get rid of the $2 million salary. Now, good luck giving him away. Maybe you place him on waivers and clear $1 million, and then you hope somebody picks him up. But right now, it's like, their defense is not good enough. They're going to have to rely internally on Liljegren coming back and Jordy Benn coming back, and hope that plugs the hole. But right now, their defense is killing them.
You can't think that at the end, when at the end of the day, the end of the season, an autopsy is being done, the linchpin on this season and its success was Jake Muzzin. They had to have known prior to, as he's convalescing and getting back into the mix and trying to recuperate and regenerate for this season ahead, that it was still up in the air, knowing what they knew.
But what were their options, Norm?
Right.
He's healthy coming into the season until he gets hurt in 3-4 games into the season. They sat him out most of training camp to preserve him, to make sure he didn't take an injury during training camp. His contract is guaranteed unless you say, Jake, you're not going to play. We want you to retire, which there's no, that good luck with that. Really, in a sense, they had to wait until he got hurt again and hope that he didn't. But they had to wait until something happened, and something happened 4 games into the season. And now good luck. Yeah. Now you really didn't have a disaster plan based on the fact that you didn't have the cap room to be able to do anything. And you're going to have to probably wait until, I would say, unless they're in on Jacob Chychrun, and that poses a whole new set of problems, because Jacob Chychrun at 24 years old is as injury prone as Jake Muzzin is. Unless you're going down that road, where are you going? You have to wait till the deadline.
So we've talked about this over and over again for years. Why is Dubas still all in on the 4 guys who make all the money and believing that if he plays his economics right, he can piecemeal the rest of the team to success. Why is he still all in on that, Mike? Why doesn't he just say, fuck this?
He
See you later,
believes
88. You're gone. We're gonna free up some money and let's
he
let
believes he believes
work this thing. I'm not, and again, I'm not advocating for trading William Nylander, but he was the guy that we always talked about and got shit on for talking about it. But let's continue to talk about it because the this team is so weighed down by those contracts, and the OGs and converts are bringing this up, and I'm like, oh, let's not worry about. Wait a minute, again, it does prevail over everything that we're talking about.
he believes that skill overcomes and it's too simple to say skill overcomes sandpaper, but my assertion over the few years is that you need a team that's multi-dimensional. You cannot just have a team with pure skill. Now, they're to my mind, like the guys who provide the sandpaper are guys who can't do it anymore. Muzzin, because I think he's physically compromised, or guys like Wayne Simmons who are fourth liners. You don't have a guy in this lineup who's a top 4 defenseman or who's a top 6 forward who really provides the impetus and the physicality that you need in terms of pushback. Florida got Matthew Tkachuk. Tom Wilson is out there. You either draft that type of guy, and maybe Matthew Nyes is going to be that, but he's not there right now. And right now, in the here and the now, your pushback on your top 6 is 5'11" Michael Bunting, and then he's a gritty, sandpapery guy, and he creates a shitstorm, but he's not pushback. He's a rat. He's a guy who generates controversy on the ice. This team is not physical. They're not particularly good defensively, and they have to rely on pure offense to win games. And when that offense doesn't produce, they lose games. So that's the whole thing.
Ethan Bear goes to Vancouver. The Leafs pass on him because they don't want to give up one of their precious draft picks. They're not in a position of leverage with picks and the ability to make acquisitions to improve the franchise in the near-term future. Was that a mistake, Mike, or and we'll wrap up here soon so we don't go too long. Was that a mistake, or are we thinking that Kyle Dubas viewed that acquisition potentially as just a stopgap, and the long-term ability to improve the team outweighs this short-term patchwork amendment to a defense that has greater issues than just a guy like Bear coming in to play a few games in the meantime?
Bear would have been a Band-Aid. I mean, he's
right.
He's not a top 4 defenseman, but he's a capable NHLer. And right now, Philip Kral, who played his first NHL game last night, he tried. I mean, he's 23 years old. It was his first NHL game. I think at times he played well, but, at times he was exposed. They had to put him on the penalty kill when one of their main penalty killers, Hall, was in the penalty box. So, you're playing with a thin deep. Now, if like Jordy Ben is on your bottom pairing, he's capable of killing penalties. He's a big body guy. And Liljegren can do that as well. He's a strong kid. But, like Kral in his first NHL game was forced to play in a position where he's not, I think, comfortable. And that shows the thinness of the organization right now. So, I mean, the funny thing is that they do have options up front when it comes to if their bottom 6 guys are not contributing. You've got 2 guys down with the Marlies, and Joey Anderson's got 6 goals in 6 games with the Marlies, and Alex Steeves, who had a really good training camp, and Pontus Holmberg, who played well in training camp. So you have options there. The problem is that other than Wayne Simmons, who's already cleared waivers, all the players like Aston Reese and Abe Kubel, and they have to clear waivers. And you could say, well, I don't care if they lose them on waivers, but that's the thing, that's the calculation that they have to make here. If you lose these guys, do you have enough confidence in the guys that you're bringing up that they're going to stay and they're going to do the job? I don't know. And, State of Survival in the chat says they need Scott Mayfield. Yeah, great. You think Lou Lamoriello is going to give them Scott Mayfield? No. The Islanders are in it life and death to make the playoffs, and Scott Mayfield is a 6'5" right-hand shot defenseman. Why would they give him up? They're not.
Certainly not going to give him to the Maple Leafs.
Yeah, no, and that's the thing. Now you're in a position, unless you're in on Chychrun, you're in a position right now that you are not going to be able to get a defenseman that will help you until probably after Thanksgiving and more likely at the deadline. And in that instance, that might be too late. Now, I think they'll turn it around. I think they'll start scoring. Matthews and Marner are too talented to struggle as much as they have early in the season. But you're bleeding points, and this is not another year where there's going to be a 20-point gap in between the 8 teams that make the playoffs and the 8 teams that don't. It's going to be close, and that's why I brought up Buffalo and Detroit and Ottawa and Boston. These teams are not – the only team that's a slouch right now is Montreal because, they're in the Connor Bedard sweepstakes. But even they're not going to be a guaranteed loss every year. So you've got to beat the teams that you're better than. And right now, 9 games in, the Toronto Maple Leafs have not beaten the teams that they are better than once.
I don't expect that to change. What I do expect to occur is more scoring. When the Leafs score and the skill is on display, because the skill is the centerpiece of the organization and the reason we're all supposed to believe, the spotlight will shine less bright on the defense, the goalies, other things happening, whatever Sheldon Keefe is saying in that moment. And that's what it comes down to. Really, Mike, that's what it comes down to. Scoring 6 goals in the last 3 games, that's one, it's not going to cut it, but that's not what the Leafs have done. And I don't think we'll continue to do. But they need to score. They need to be offensive. They need to be overbearing offensively and win that way, because that's the way the team is constructed. So, there's 2 things. And again, we'll wrap up. People complain we go too long, Mike. People complain we're not short enough. We're too short. Sorry.
We'll please half of them, and we'll piss off the other half.
Yeah, I know. But we love them all. We appreciate it. But my last point is, there's just 2 things going here, right? We want the team to find its way now and somehow succeed. But when you think about it, maybe failure will expose the shortcomings and the disparity and the discrepancy in the way that the organization is constructed to a degree where change will be made for the better. And whether it's Kyle Dubas or someone else doing that, maybe deep down, that's what needs to occur. Last point to you.
Yeah, I will grant that point, but the problem is that I think that you're throwing away another season with Matthews and Marner in this core group and another year on John Tavares by saying, okay, maybe we need to root for failure for the real changes. That, you know what I'm saying? I get the point that, okay, exposing their idiosyncrasies and their shortcomings, in the end might be good because then they can address them. Well, they haven't addressed them. And we've known what those problems were for the last 3 years. And Kyle Dubas doesn't want. Now, he believes in his plan, and I respect him for that. I don't agree with it. But you could say, well, they had they had the Sheldon Keefe team a couple years ago when they brought in Bogosian and when they brought in Thornton and when they brought in Nick Foligno at the trade deadline, and they lost to Montreal.
Yeah, they were up 3-1 and then shit the bed.
Right, so they lost
the very thing with that group.
So, Foligno gets hurt, Tavares gets hurt.
Right.
They blow a 3-1 lead. Jack Campbell doesn't come up big. All those things. Excuses are for losers.
Mm-hmm.
They really are. It's like the New York Yankees had a lot of excuses for losing to the Houston Astros. Nobody who is a fan of the New York Yankees cares about those excuses. They care that they have not made the World Series since 2009. Blue Jays fans, I'm sure, I really wanted to hear excuses when they lost to Kansas City. It's like nobody cares. They care about winning.
Mhm.
That's what they care about. And the Leafs may turn things around when they come back from this West Coast swing. They may win against Anaheim. They may score 8 goals against Anaheim, and then they may start on a long winning streak. And people will then forget the slow start of the season. But then in April or May, when they're in the playoffs, and if they don't show up, then people are going to remember it.
Mm-hmm. Remember, we're living in the moment with this show this season. Looking back, there is some assurity, comfort in knowing that the Leafs typically prevail and typically do well and position themselves um, in a good way before the playoffs. In this moment, it's not looking that great. So in this moment, as of right now, it's frustrating, and what we're seeing from this defense that is has been eroded and that is not playing at full capacity in terms of players and the lack of offense. It's frustrating. Uh, if we're to look into our crystal ball based on what we know from the past, we'll expect this team to hit the upswing and get going because that's its only, I mean, with this group, that's really its only choice. And that's to play high skill defensive hockey and overwhelm the opposition. Because if the team, the way it's constructed to do that, can't do that, then we may be looking at a reconfiguration here at some point, and it may start in the boardroom. Mike, do you have anything else you want to add? I know that you have great work at hockeybuzz.com. We appreciate it very much. The New York Yankee hangover hopefully has dissipated, and now you're on to thinking about hockey and then a little bit about the Bills. And you're still sticking with the Houston Astros to win the World Series.
Yeah, unfortunately. I mean, if the let's just say if the gods were kind, the Astros would lose every series, but they may have more talent and their pitching staff is better than the Phillies. So my prediction was Houston in 6, but I'm hopeful that they do lose.
OG's Converse, thanks so much for all of your support. Like this post, subscribe to the YouTube channel, listen to us on your favorite podcast platform. Let everybody know what we are doing here in London and Buffalo every Sunday morning, and that's talk about the team that we love and loathe, the Toronto Maple Leafs. For Mike, I'm Norm. See you soon.